Hi everyone, as I'm sure you're all aware, this year marks the 80th anniversary of Operation Overlord, better known as the D-Day landings. In June of 1944, over 4 years after the disastrous events at Dunkirk, the Allies amassed the largest invasion fleet in history along the coast of England, ready to open a renewed Western Front in the war.
The invasion force consisted of over 11,000 aircraft, 7,000 ships and landing craft, with over 150,000 Allied troops, ready to punch a hole in Hitler's defences and start on the road to liberating Europe.
Originally planned for the 5th of June, D-Day had to be delayed 24 hours due to storms and sea conditions. However, on the night of the 5th of June, under the cover of darkness, 18,000 airborne troops from the American 82nd and the 101st and the British 6th Airborne Divisions were dropped behind enemy lines into Normandy, either by parachute or glider.
The Americans' objectives were to seize control of causeways behind Utah Beach to secure footholds for the landing forces and delay any German forces from reinforcing the coastal defences. Among the British objectives was to seize and hold the bridges over the River Orne and the Caen Canal. This was vital to delay the SS Panzer divisions from reacting to the invasion and pushing the Allies back into the sea.
Major John Howard and 181 British airborne troops were loaded onto airspeed Horsa gliders on the night of the 5th of June and flown in to seize and hold the two bridges. The pilots carried out controlled crash landings within yards of the bridges, taking the Germans completely by surprise. The bridges were secured within 10 minutes of landing, with the loss of just 2 airborne troops.
The American 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions, along with the US Rangers, saw the heaviest fighting of the beach landings at Omaha. The first wave landed at 0630 hours.
The aerial naval bombardment that was supposed to have softened the German defence had been inaccurate, leaving most of the defensive positions intact.
The infantry was supposed to be supported by amphibious tanks, known as DD tanks. However, many of the tanks were deployed too far out in rough seas, where most of them sank. Many of the tank crews were drowned.
The first 2 assault waves, including the engineers who were tasked with clearing the beaches of the many obstacles, were decimated by heavy enemy fire. Those that had not been killed or wounded were pinned down on the beach with little or no cover.
Amidst the chaos and killing, naval destroyers deploy closer to the shore and fire their guns directly at the German strongpoints. This allows small groups of infantry to make their way up the beach and behind the German defences, carrying out assaults on defensive bunkers one by one.
Although this allowed further assault waves to come ashore and establish a beachhead, the situation remained critical, with around just a mile of ground taken by the end of day 1.
Casualties were not recorded at the time, but estimates put the casualty figures for Omaha at around 3,600, including naval and air force casualties. Around 800 assault troops were killed.
The aerial and naval bombardment from the RAF Bomber Command and the Allied ships were a lot more successful in pounding the German defences along Utah Beach. Assault troops of the American 4th Infantry Division start to land at 0630 hours.
The tide pushes the landing craft around 2,000 yards southeast of the intended landing ground, where fortunately German defences are lighter, meaning the troops quickly establish a beachhead.
Assault troops quickly link up with elements of the 101st Airborne Division, who had secured 4 causeways to the rear of Utah. The area had been intentionally flooded by the defenders in an attempt to bog down any invasion force.
The DD tanks that were supposed to land to support the troops were delayed. However, most made it to the beaches to help in establishing the beachhead.
The troops' main objective was to link up with their allies that landed on Omaha and take the port of Cherbourg, which was essentially to allow the allies to bring reinforcements and equipment ashore.
Casualties estimated for Utah were around 600, with almost 200 killed in action. There were also almost 600 naval and air force casualties. The Point du Hoc is a high point between the beaches of Omaha and Utah. This was the location of a German artillery battery consisting of 6 155mm guns overlooking and able to fire on the American sector beaches.
This area was heavily bombed on the lead up to D-Day, but to ensure the threat was neutralised, forces from the US commandos were tasked with scaling the cliffs on the morning of D-Day in order to destroy or capture the guns.
After a delay due to rough seas, the commandos arrived at the bottom of the cliffs in their landing craft at 0700 hours. Most of their mortar-fired grappling hooks fouled due to the ropes being weighed down with water and fell to the beach.
The commandos, using ropes in their bare hands, begin to climb the cliffs while the German defenders throw down a hail of bullets and grenades. The commandos reach the top and the German position is overcome within 15 minutes, only to find that the artillery guns have been moved.
A further search discovers that they have been moved further inland to avoid the bombardment. Their firing mechanisms were quickly destroyed. Of the 225 strong force that landed at Point du Hoc, around 15 were killed and another 15 injured, although more were killed in the fighting in the days to come. Naval bombardment on Sword starts at 0530 hours, with the first landing craft carrying troops from the British 3rd Infantry Division landed on the beaches at 0725 hours. The DD tanks landed around the same time, giving support to the infantry.
Heavy German fire from a defensive strongpoint, codenamed Cod, inflicts many losses on the first wave of infantry and supporting tanks.
On the eastern side of Sword, commando units, including 3 French commandos, stormed German defensive positions and a gun battery, advancing inland to link up with the airborne forces to secure the bridges over the Caen Canal and the River Orne.
Later in the afternoon, the German 21st Panzer Division launches a counter-attack, advancing towards the beaches of Sword and Juno. However, after the loss of around 50 tanks, the Germans are forced to withdraw.
Heavy beach congestion and determined German resistance prevent the British from capturing Caen, which was a rather ambitious objective for the first day. The city was not liberated until the 9th of July, after a month of fighting.
By the end of day 1, a deep beachhead had been established with around 630 British casualties.
At 0725 hours, the Royal Engineer breaching squadrons are the first troops to land on Gold Beach, with their Churchill Avery tanks, mine clearing vehicles and bulldozers. They start clearing the beach obstacles hampered by German machine gun fire.
At 0735 hours, the assault troops from the British 50th Infantry Division start to land. On the western side of the beach, many land further east than planned without their breaching squadrons. Some obstacles are overcome, but others cause heavy casualties amongst the British troops.
The landings on the eastern flank of the beach are more successful, and in most places the troops are able to advance rapidly inland. The coastal villages on the edge of Gold prove to be a flashpoint of heavy German resistance, delaying the advance for up to 2 hours.
Troops overcame fierce resistance and managed to take the German strongholds by the end of the day with the support of tanks. They achieved the furthest advance of all the beach landings on D-Day.
Arromanches fell to the British on the evening of D-Day, with the town of Bayeux being taken the next day, almost undamaged. The British suffered over 1,000 casualties, including 350 killed on Gold Beach.
Canadian troops from the 3rd Canadian Division landed on eastern and western flanks of Juno Beach at 07:35 and 07:45 hours. Many of the landing craft came under heavy fire, but were damaged by underwater obstacles as they approached the beach.
The assault troops succeeded in destroying the German positions one at a time with support from the tanks. The village of St Alban saw some of the heaviest fighting, where it took most of the day to neutralise a German 50mm gun overlooking the beach.
Despite congestion and a build-up of vehicles on the beach, the Canadian troops made good advances inland, where their objective was to link up with the British troops from Gold and Sword to advance on to Caen.
However, the next day, their advance was cut short by the deployment of German panzer divisions. The Canadians suffered around 960 casualties, including 319 killed. D-Day was just the beginning. The Battle of Normandy lasted another 12 weeks, with the Allied forces fighting fierce German resistance, mostly concentrated in the east against the British and Canadians. This allowed the Americans to break through in the west.
Paris was eventually liberated on the 25th of August, with the German forces in full retreat back into Germany. Casualties amongst the Allies were heavy, but Hitler's refusal to allow his commanders to make tactical withdrawals when required meant that the bulk of the enemy forces were eventually trapped and destroyed.
It is important that the sacrifice of these young men, most of them in their teens or early 20s, are never forgotten. The freedoms we enjoy today are because of the sacrifices they made on these beaches 80 years ago.